Welcome to Who's Next on the X. We are here on the campus of Northwest Missouri State University. My name is Tyler Dave, and I am with Craig McMullen, the sports director for KZLX LP Maryville. Craig, how are you doing?
I am doing absolutely great today.
Wonderful.
Yep.
So kind of tell me a little bit about your childhood. What was it like for Craig to be, Craig at that time, and were you watching a lot of sports? Were you wanting to be a broadcaster as a child? I can't imagine anyone would want to do that, but was that you?
My dad started taking me to Chiefs games back in 2010.
Yeah.
And that was my first ever Chiefs game. Chiefs versus 49ers was my first ever game. That's when my dad introduced me to football and sat me down at Arrowhead. I remember the seats that I was sitting in, and the Chiefs won that game 31-10.
Wow.
Matt Castle was the quarterback for the Chiefs at the time, and Alex Smith was the quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers, which Alex Smith ends up on the Chiefs a few years later.
So football, it sounds like, to me anyway, football was kind of was it a bonding time for you?
Just whenever we go to a Chiefs game, it allows us to bond and spend a weekend together. Yep.
Yeah. So were you watching only football as a kid? Were there other sports that you were watching as well, like maybe baseball or basketball?
It was football and basketball. Those are my two big sports I watched. I was always constantly watching football, watching the NFL, and then also Creighton Blue Jays basketball.
Okay.
Yep.
So kind of a regional team that you were watching.
Yes, because I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. So.
And that makes total sense
Yes.
then why you would watch the Creighton Blue Jays.
Yes.
If you had to give me off of your top 5 right now for broadcasters, who would you say is at your number 1 that you idolize or that you look up to currently?
I would like to sit down and meet with, obviously, Mitch Holstis on the Chiefs.
I completely understand.
I have so many stories of just driving in and out of Arrowhead, the parking lot, with my dad, and that was the voice I would listen to, Mitch Holstis, on the way back home to Omaha.
Faking right side, he wants it, a comeback cut, it is caught by Kelsey! Touchdown, Kansas City!
And how he just paints the picture of his broadcast, too.
Every time. He never misses a beat. For anyone that's listening out there to this, and maybe they're thinking about becoming a broadcaster, maybe they're younger and thinking about maybe getting into broadcasting, what sort of advice would you give to them whenever it comes to becoming a broadcaster, or not specifically a sports broadcaster, but just a broadcaster in general?
Okay, for being a broadcaster, just don't be afraid to just get on air. Don't be afraid to get on air, even if you mess up your first time. You can listen back to your broadcasts and make notes of how you can get better.
Kick it into play and sinks it in the back of the net.
Great.
It will be another goal for the Bearcats.
I made mistakes throughout my broadcasts and all, and I was able to go in and get them corrected. So
yeah, and honestly, I can say the exact same thing. I was not perfect the first time I was on air.
Nobody's going to be perfect the first time you're on air.
No,
but.
And even if you make mistakes after that, it's one of those things you take it, you learn from it, and you move on. Craig, thank you so much for being on. I loved hearing everything from you, and it was a pleasure to have you on this podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah,
today.
of course. You're listening to KZLX LP Maryville, 106.7 The X.